The book of Daniel has much to say about living in the midst of turbulent times. It would be a fitting title for the book of Daniel, would it not? Hope in the midst of turbulent times. Whatever you have gone through, I guarantee it has not risen to the level of Daniel's despair. I guarantee you that your worst day was better than what Daniel experienced when he, many of his countrymen, were dragged off in chains to a foreign land. And yet, the book of Daniel stands to give us hope in the midst of those turbulent times. Listen to this from one commentator. Over against the might of Babylon and the seeming superiority of her gods, two questions face exiled Jews. Is Israel's God truly God as compared with the Babylonian ones? And will God forgive the sin of his people and resume fellowship with them? The first question is answered in Daniel by his recounting of the might of Israel's God as he exercises his sovereignty over all human kingdoms. The kingdom theology of the book of Daniel is an answer to the exile's concern over the uniqueness of Israel's God. The book of Daniel also answers the second question. Not only is the theme of kingdom present, but also that of covenant. Covenant is present implicitly in the narrative sections of the book, with the emphasis on the distinctiveness of Daniel and his companions in their exilic setting. However, in chapters 9 through 11, the covenant theme appears explicitly. Is our God truly God? And will he forgive us and redeem us? Those are the questions, not just for Daniel, those are the questions for us. Is my God truly God? And in the light of my circumstances, will he redeem me? Will he rescue me? Will it eventually be all right? If you have not asked those questions, you just haven't lived long enough. Amen? Those are the questions with which we all wrestle. And those are the questions that Daniel answers. Daniel is one of those books that we know about, but only in part. And we know about it only in part because most of us have only ventured to try to understand the first half of the book. Amen. And that badly, because oftentimes when we go to the first half of the book, there's several ways that you can divide the book of Daniel. There's two halves. There's the narrative half, chapters 1 through 6, and most of us know about the narrative half in chapters 1 through 6. It's narrative, like 40% of the Old Testament is narrative, and we get there and it's great. Well, of course, the way we deal with it is not so great, because again, we don't have a redemptive historic approach. We don't have a Christ-centered approach, so all we're left with is moralism. Daniel and his friends are great. Be like them. Like the old song, dare to be a Daniel, dare to stand alone. Okay, that's the way we look at the book of Daniel. It's moralism, pure and simple. Here's what they did that was good. Do that so that God will be pleased with you and that all may go well with you. We messed that up, and that's the easy half. The difficulty comes in the second half, in the apocalyptic section, beginning at chapter 7, where there are all these dreams and visions that Daniel is interpreting. And for most of us, we don't even bother reading through those. We just go get a good study Bible or something that will tell us what we're supposed to believe about the symbols. If you can't say amen, you ought to say ouch, okay? We don't even wade through that. And of course, why should we wade through that? Because after all, it really doesn't have any value, except for maybe to interpret some of the signs of the end times. Isn't it amazing that we're okay with that idea? that God gives a book, and the book of Daniel is written probably somewhere around 530 BC. Okay, some folks will put it later than that, and there's several reasons for that, but Daniel's probably dated somewhere around 530 BC. The events in the book of Daniel take place between 605 and 537 BC. The book is written shortly thereafter, around 530, or completed shortly thereafter, around 530. But isn't it interesting that we're okay with the idea that God would have a book of the Bible written, and half of it is absolutely meaningless to all people in all times except those who happen to be here at the end? Really? Is that what you think? Now, I know what's going on inside you right now, because inside you right now, you're going, I know I'm supposed to shake my head no to Pastor Voddie right now, because it just really sounds bad the way he put it. But before he said that, yeah. So my answer is, no, God did not give us a book that was without meaning or is without meaning for everyone except those who are alive at the end of the age. It had meaning for the exiles, and it has meaning for us. Every last bit of it has meaning for us. Not only can you divide it into two halves, but you can also divide it into two languages. This is unique about the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 1 through Daniel chapter 2 and verse 4a is written in Hebrew. Daniel chapter 2 verse 4b through the end of Daniel chapter 7 is written in Aramaic. Then it goes back into Hebrew again. So 3 sections, 2 different languages. The Hebrew section, the Aramaic body, and then the Hebrew closing of this letter. It's another way that you could divide it. But since we're not going to be reading Hebrew and Aramaic, we won't divide it that way. There's a third thing that you see here. In the Aramaic section, there is a chiasm. Now, we've talked about chiastic structures before. You know, the structure kind of like a cross, if you will. There's a chiasm in the second section, the Aramaic section, which is very important that it's written in the Aramaic language and has a chiastic structure. And it is just the Aramaic portion that has the chiastic structure. What is the chiasm? Now, again, we don't have a chart up here for you, so it's difficult for me to show you. So I will try to walk it out for you. And think about it going on a piece of paper like this, okay, in and then out, but visualize it as I move. In chapter 2, there's a dream of a statue representing 4 kingdoms. Chapter 3, there's worship of the golden statue or perish in a pit. Chapter 4, there's the judgment of King Nebuchadnezzar. Now we're going to start the same thing in reverse. Chapter 5, there's the judgment of Belshazzar. Chapter 6, worship Darius or perish in a pit. Chapter 7, a dream of 4 beasts who represent 4 kingdoms. Perfect chiastic structure. Very rarely seen anywhere. But here, in the Aramaic portion, there is a perfect chiasm. And there is a message there in that structure. We'll talk about that as our time goes on.